think there were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were. It always has been one of the remarkable features.
Behind the velvet curtains of Buckingham Palace came a moment that made even the hardiest royals shake in their boots. It wasn't a grand ceremony. It wasn't made public. It was something more intimate and more disturbing. According to palace grapevine rumors, it was seen that the hard-nosed, no-nonsense pillar of the royal family, Princess Anne, was in tears. Why? She just walked into something unbelievable happening to her great niece, Princess Charlotte, and no less than Queen Camilla. Charlotte, just 9 years old, was said to rehearse for a future performance that would have ripples throughout the news, but not with words of hers. She was rehearsing Camilla's words. And when she realized what was being forced upon the inexperienced monarch, his legendary serenity broke. She reportedly intervened with fierce urgency, all tears streaming, voice shaking, as she swept Charlotte into arms and demanded that it all stop. What do you think went on between Camilla and the future Princess Royal to push the most stoical of them all to an emotional breaking point? And why were rehearsal footage and press previews ordered to be deleted, and why no official explanation was given? Something happened within palace walls, and the royal family doesn't want you to know. Tune in and press that subscribe button today, because this story upends everything you think you know about royal fervor, maternal protection, and the subtle scheming for power in the kingdom. A few days before the eagerly anticipated Children's Royal Arts Gala, the chandeliers were polished with a cloth, flowers were arranged, and staff members talked in hushed tones. Why? Because this wasn't just another gala. This would constitute Princess Charlotte's initial lone appearance at a function ever, her official introduction to life as a rising royal. Personally chosen by palace advisors, the small princess would act as junior royal host, receiving child entertainers, introducing acts, and even delivering a short speech. A delicate but historic foray into royal life. Meanwhile, backstage, the event was also transforming into a silent battleground. Queen Camilla, now well entrenched in consort life, had expressed a particular interest in the event. Not just an interest, she took control of creative direction. From inside reports, Camilla overruled advisors and insisted Charlotte not make a speech on children's creativity or the future of the monarchy. Instead, she would deliver a memorized tribute to Camilla's own royal foundation. Yes, a tribute, by a 9-year-old, to the Queen Consort. "It's just a symbolic gesture," Camilla reportedly said in private. Not everyone thought so, however. Certain advisors of Charles were stunned, actually incensed. They considered it tone-deaf, selfish, and worse. A cynical PR stunt to stealthily reinforce the image of Camilla by deploying the innocent face of Charlotte. The tension became tangible. Staff were reported to walk nervously down corridors, not sure whether to obey Camilla's cuts or appeal to senior authority, such as William or indeed the king, but they didn't have to, since there was another person looking, and she wasn't going to let that pass. Princess Anne kept a watchful eye on rehearsals, and what she was just about to discover would change the mood of the entire evening and nearly make her cry. Princess Anne, the steel spine of the palace, as insiders know her, had survived enough palace intrigue for a lifetime. Nothing, however, could have equipped her for what she walked into on that rainy afternoon. She'd been scheduled for an unofficial drop-in to wrap gala plans, nothing set in stone. A brief visit just to provide moral support. But as she went down a side corridor next to the music room, Anne heard something terrifying. "She forgets the lines. She's crying again." A whisper from an aide, just loud enough but enough to make Anne stop mid-step. She swung slowly around and opened the door. What she discovered inside made her briefly stunned. There was Princess Charlotte, in a small rehearsal dress, not quite holding back tears. On her small hands was a cue card with Camilla's name and foundation tagline. Beside her stood a junior speech coach, asking her to smile and keep reading. "Say it with thanks, darling. Say it like you mean it." But Charlotte wasn't smiling. She was bewildered, stiff, and inwardly fearful. In the corner of the room, a royal advisor sat and wrote down notes, presumably for press coordination. The room didn't have any warmth, no laughter, only an odd, sterile rehearsal of a child who'd been made to memorize lines she didn't understand. That's when Anne moved. She entered, with no warning, no announcement, and went immediately to her niece. "Charlotte, pretty, come nearer." Her voice, normally steady and commanding, trembled. Charlotte looked up, red-eyed, and threw herself into Anne's arms. The room was electrified. The hardest-working royal now was holding a screaming child, and she was shielding her own family from something that didn't seem right. A palace spokesperson later said Anne's lips shook as she spoke in hushed tones and blinked tears away, but didn't hide them. For Anne, it wasn't just royal overreach. It was a breach of faith, and she felt it in her bones. At that precise moment, with the room in awkward silence, the door opened. Queen Camilla entered. She paused, shocked by the tableau. Anne cradling Charlotte, the speech cards lying in shreds on the floor, and an open look of betrayal on Anne's face. And in that silence, the air became cold. What came next would spark a fight that not many within the palace will ever forget. Queen Camilla stood just within the entrance, expression impassive, looking over the scene. Charlotte is sob-streamed and attached to Anne, abandoned cue cards on the rug. And Princess Anne, eyes steady, voice shaking, rising to her full towering height. The silence broke like thunder when finally Anne spoke. "This is a child and not a means of building a legacy." She talked in a hushed tone, but it cut across the room like a knife. Aides took a backward step involuntarily. Charlotte didn't utter a word. She just clung to her aunt. Camilla was stunned and tried to collect her. "Anne, it's just a few lines. A simple tribute, not harmful." Anne stepped ahead, now face to face. "To you, perhaps. But to her, she cries at rehearsals. She's afraid. Have you footage at all?" Camilla looked away, not saying anything. She hadn't. Anne's voice cracked, not with anger, but raw emotion. "You'd have her praise your foundation. You don't put pressure on a little girl to handle your image, least of all on its initial high-profile move as a member of the family." Then it did. A tear fell. Not Charlotte's today, but Anne's. A solitary, silent tear that mirrored the radiance of the chandeliers. Not even the assistants to look. Not rage, it was grief. And loyalty. Camilla was taken aback. Throughout those decades of navigating royal politics, she had rarely seen Anne exposed. "This is not about you, Camilla," said Anne, voice thick now. "It's about her. And if we're prostituting her now at 14, what do we do at 20? Charlotte's eyes widened and she looked at her aunt in shocked silence, as if she'd just seen a knight ride into battle for her. And at that moment, it was clear. Princess Anne
What happened in that rehearsal room didn't stay a secret for very long. Sources explain that King Charles retreated to his own study, requesting time alone. Sources affirm that he watched the rehearsal video described by Anne, a video of stammering Charlotte choking back tears. He reportedly sighed, looked down at his wedding band, and muttered, "We've gone so far. Why? Why again?" Charles had made efforts throughout the Medit and Andrew scandals to keep the family united. Now, however, tension has intruded on the next generation, and that scared him. At the same time, at Adelaide Cottage, William and Kate were informed by a trustworthy aide, just as Anne was leaving with Charlotte. Kate's face supposedly went white. Her daughter was upset, manipulated, and used in a manner she wasn't prepared for. William? He was furious. Nobody treats my daughter like that. He allegedly replied to his bodyguards and asked for a full briefing. Insider said he made a private telephone call to Anne that evening to thank her, his voice trembling. Kate also called Anne, allegedly in tears. "We don't know what we'd do without you." For a couple notorious for playing it safe in the spotlight, this wasn't politics anymore. This was parenthood. The aftermath for Queen Camilla was significantly more discreet. Several reports indicated that she stayed alone in Clarence's house and terminated all appointments for the following day. Aides report that she was clearly shaken, not merely by the tirade of Anne, but by the fact that she realized she had gone too far. She'd survived decades of news coverage. She'd faced hate, media scorn, and worse. But this was a rift from within the family, and that was something Camilla couldn't spin. "Have I gone too far?" she was heard asking her private secretary in the early hours. By tomorrow morning, royal spokespersons were in damage control. Not a whisper to the press, not a statement, nothing but silence. The royal family stayed exceptionally quiet in the subsequent days. Queen Camilla, not normally flexible in public stance, was said to have been rattled by the altercation with Anne. What was initially a PR effort had turned into a family split she wasn't preparing for. Sources at Clarence's house explained that Camilla, obviously distraught, called off future engagements and instead remained at home by herself, replaying and reliving the events of the fateful evening. Camilla finally called. Not with grand gestures, not with palace statements, by private correspondence personally presented to Princess Anne. It was brief, but poignant. "Anne, I meant no disrespect. I inaccurately estimated how Charlotte needed me, and I cared more about looking good than she was comfortable with. I'm sorry, truly, Camilla." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. Yet for Anne, a lady who appreciates action more than pageantry, it was sufficient. Camilla didn't stop there. 2 days thereafter, a small velvet box came to Kensington Palace, labeled on the wrapping, "To Charlotte with love." Within was a slender silver locket, inscribed with 5 concise words, "With love, Auntie C." The gesture surprised many. No publicity, no press, only reconciliation, veiled in silent silver. For those within palace walls, it was a rare act of humility by the queen consort. For others, it arrived half a century late. But something became clear. The break had made its mark. Not just on Camilla's public face, but on how the palace would handle the next generation from now on. No more puppetry. No more manipulations. If anything, Anne made sure of just that. And there you have it. Princess Anne disregarding protocol and losing it in tears for the sake of protecting little Princess Charlotte from an ordeal she should have not been subjected to. A silver locket, a speech redraft, and a message of silence.